The ships came out of nowhere on a Tuesday morning. One moment the sky was clear blue with white clouds, and the next moment it was full of metal and shadow. 12 massive vessels hung in the air like dark mountains, blocking out the sun. Maria. Santos was picking tomatoes when the shadows fell across her garden. She looked up and dropped her basket. The tomatoes rolled across the ground, red and round and forgotten. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Above her, the ships were bigger than anything humans had ever built. The emergency sirens started wailing. Jake Morrison ran from his house toward the communication center. His bare feet slapped against the dirt road. Behind him, his wife Helen was screaming his name, but he couldn't stop. Not now, not when everything was falling apart. Danny Walsh was already at the emergency station when Jake arrived. His face was white, but his hands were steady as he activated the colony's defense protocols. Red lights flashed on screens that had never been used before. Warning messages filled the air. "How many people know about the bunkers?" Jake asked. "Maybe 20, Danny said. "The emergency council and their families. Get them moving. Start with the families with children." The first attack came without warning. Beams of blue light stabbed down from the alien ships like lightning. They hit the grain silos and the food processing plant. Explosions shook the ground. Fire and smoke rose into the sky. Lisa Park was running between houses, pounding on doors. "Emergency evacuation," she shouted. "Everyone to the town square. Bring nothing but your families." Some people stood frozen in their doorways, staring at the burning buildings. Others ran in circles, not knowing where to go. Children cried for their parents. Parents searched frantically for their children. Kate Rodriguez was already at the hidden entrance to the tunnel system. She had memorized every passage and every room 15 years ago when the bunkers were built. Her hands flew over the control panel, opening doors that had been sealed since the colony's first day. "Down here," she called to the Brooks family as they ran past. "Tom, get your family into the tunnel. Nancy, help me with the children." The Castillo family was trying to save their livestock when the second wave of attacks came. Carlos stood in his field, unwilling to leave the cattle that represented his life's work. His son grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the hidden bunker entrance. "Papa, the animals don't matter now," the young man said. "We have to live." Underground, the tunnels were dark and cold. Emergency lights flickered on as families crowded into spaces designed for storage, not living. The air smelled of metal and fear. Children pressed close to their parents. Old people sat on boxes and tried to catch their breath. Dr. Amy Chen set up a medical station in one of the larger rooms. Her supplies were limited to what she could carry, but she worked quickly to treat cuts and burns from people who had been caught in the explosions. Her hands never shook, even when the ground above them rumbled with more attacks. On the surface, alien soldiers were landing. Their ships were smaller than the massive vessels overhead, but they moved fast and landed hard. Dust clouds rose from their touchdown points around the colony's edge. The aliens themselves were like nothing from human imagination. They stood 8 feet tall on 2 legs, but their skin was scaled like a snake's. Their faces were long and narrow with too many teeth. They wore armor that seemed to move with them, powered by technology humans couldn't understand. Commander HFY stepped from his landing craft and breathed the alien air. His sensors told him this world was perfect for his people. The gravity was right. The atmosphere was breathable, and the soil was rich. Soon it would belong to the Zephyrian Empire. His intelligence reports said the humans were farmers, weak creatures who grew food and raised young and had no understanding of war. His soldiers had conquered 17 worlds in the last 50 years. This would be the easiest victory yet. But the humans didn't run like the other species had. Instead, they disappeared. The Zephyrian advance guard entered the colony expecting to find crowds of cowering primitives. Instead, they found empty streets and abandoned houses. Danny Walsh watched the aliens through a hidden camera. He was in the colony's old security center, deep underground. The screens showed him everything happening on the surface. The aliens were spreading out, checking every building. "They're looking for us," he said into his radio. "Everyone stay quiet and stay hidden." Roy Phillips was in Tunnel Section 7 with his daughter and a group of other families. He had brought his tool, kit, and he was already thinking about what he could build with the supplies down here. The emergency stockpiles included more than food and water. There were weapons, too, old Earth military equipment that nobody thought would ever be needed. The first human attack came at sunset. A group of Zephyrian soldiers was searching the school when the building exploded around them. Kate Rodriguez had rigged charges in the basement weeks ago, following emergency protocols that seemed crazy at the time. The explosion killed 6 aliens and wounded 3 more. Commander HFY received the report with shock. His soldiers didn't die in building collapses. They were too careful, too well trained. "Investigate," he ordered. "Find out what happened." But there was no one to question. The humans had vanished, like smoke, leaving only empty buildings and hidden traps. The second attack came after midnight. Nick Harper led a small group through maintenance tunnels that connected to the old mining equipment. They had built improvised bombs from fertilizer and fuel. The aliens had set up a command post in the town square, thinking they controlled the colony. The bombs went off under their feet. The explosion lit up the night sky and shook the ground for miles around. More alien soldiers died, and their equipment was scattered across the square like broken toys. Commander HFY was angry now. These humans were supposed to be simple farmers, but they fought like trained soldiers. His technology was superior. His troops were experienced, but the humans knew this ground better than he did. "Burn it all," he ordered. "If they want to hide underground, we'll force them out." The alien ships began systematic bombardment of the colony. House by house, building by building, they turned New Haven into rubble and ash. But the humans stayed hidden in their tunnels, waiting and planning. In the underground medical center, Dr. Chen was treating Pete Johnson's burns. He had been caught on the surface during the first attack, but he had made it to safety. His wife Helen held his hand while the doctor worked. "How long can we stay down here?" Helen asked. "As long as we need to," Amy said. But privately, she knew they couldn't hide forever. The aliens would find them eventually. When that happened, they would need to be ready to fight. Governor Morrison called a meeting of the Emergency Council. In a room deep beneath the earth, 20 people gathered around a metal table. Maps of the colony and the tunnel system covered the walls. Everyone looked tired and scared, but their eyes were hard with determination. "We have 2 choices," Jake said. "We can wait for rescue that might never come, or we can fight back." "Fight with what?" asked one of the farmers. "They have warships and armor. We have garden tools." Danny Walsh opened a metal case that had been sealed for 15 years. Inside were military weapons that Earth's government had insisted on including in the emergency supplies: plasma rifles, explosive charges, and communication equipment designed for warfare. "We have more than garden tools," Danny said. "And we have something they don't." "What's that?" asked Lisa Park. "We know every inch of this place. Every tunnel, every room, every pipe and wire. This is our home, and they're just visitors." The council voted to fight. It wasn't even close. These people had left Earth to build something new and beautiful. They wouldn't let aliens take it away without a battle. Outside, in the ruins of New Haven, alien soldiers patrolled the empty streets. They had won the surface, but they didn't know about the war that was about to begin underneath their feet. The war began in earnest 3 days after the aliens arrived. But it wasn't the kind of war Commander HFY expected. There were no armies marching across open fields, no great battles with clear winners and losers. Instead, there was something much worse for an occupying force: chaos. The first lesson the aliens learned about human warfare came at dawn on the fourth day. A patrol of 6 Zephyrian soldiers was walking through the ruins of the main street when the ground beneath them exploded. Kate Rodriguez had spent all night digging a tunnel under the road and packing it with explosives made from farm chemicals. Only 2 aliens survived the blast, and they were badly wounded. When the rescue team arrived, they found the area booby-trapped, with more bombs. The humans had learned to kill their enemies twice, once with the main attack and again when help came. Commander HFY studied the reports with growing confusion. His species had conquered many worlds, but always through superior technology and overwhelming force. The humans didn't fight that way. They struck from nowhere and vanished before his soldiers could respond. "Find their base," he ordered his subordinates. "Find where they're hiding and destroy them all." But the humans didn't have a base. They had something better. They had the entire colony. Every building, every tunnel, every piece of ground was part of their weapon. Roy Phillips had spent 2 weeks turning the old mining equipment into bombs and traps. The machines that once dug tunnels for peaceful purposes now collapsed those same tunnels on alien soldiers. The humans learned to be patient. They would watch an alien patrol for hours, learning its route and timing. Then they would strike at the perfect moment. Lisa Park coordinated the attacks from her hidden communication center. She used old mining radios to talk to scattered groups of fighters across the colony. Dr. Amy Chen did more than treat wounded humans. She also studied the alien bodies that the fighters brought back from successful ambushes. Her medical knowledge helped her understand how the aliens' bodies worked. She learned that they were vulnerable to certain local plant toxins that were harmless to humans. "Their blood carries oxygen differently than ours," she explained to the council. "These purple flowers from the meadow beyond the south fields produce a chemical that disrupts their breathing." Soon, human weapons were coated with poison made from innocent-looking plants. Alien soldiers began dying from wounds that should have been minor. Commander HFY's medics couldn't understand why simple cuts were becoming fatal infections. The psychological war was just as important as the physical one. Linda Carter organized teams of children to move through ventilation shafts too small for adult humans or aliens. They would appear in unexpected places, leave false information, and disappear again. The aliens began jumping at shadows and shooting at sounds. Nick Harper used his knowledge of communication systems to intercept alien radio traffic. He couldn't understand their language, but he could detect their patterns. When alien reinforcements were coming, the radio chatter increased. When they were planning an attack, the signals became more focused. "They're going to hit the old grain storage facility tomorrow morning," Nick told Danny Walsh. "Big force, maybe 50 soldiers." Danny grinned. The grain facility had been empty since the first day of the invasion. But the aliens didn't know that. They thought it might be hiding human fighters. The attack on the grain facility became a masterpiece of human warfare. The aliens surrounded the building with overwhelming force. They used heavy weapons to blast holes in the walls. Then they charged inside, expecting to find the main human resistance. Instead, they found Roy Phillips's greatest creation, a building turned into a giant bomb. The explosion could be seen for miles. It killed 30 alien soldiers and destroyed 2 of their armored vehicles. The shockwave shattered windows in buildings that were still standing. But the real genius of the attack wasn't the explosion itself. It was what happened next. While the aliens were focused on the grain facility, human teams struck at 3 other locations simultaneously. They destroyed alien supply depots, communication arrays, and medical stations. Commander HFY received the reports and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Not fear of death in battle, which was honorable, but fear of an enemy he couldn't understand. These humans fought without honor, without rules, without any concern for military tradition. "They're like ghosts," one of his officers reported. "They appear, kill, and disappear." We control the surface during the day, but at night they own this world. The aliens tried changing their tactics. They increased patrols, set up motion detectors, and used thermal scanners to search for hidden humans. But the colonists adapted, faster than the aliens could adjust. Kate Rodriguez discovered that the alien sensors couldn't penetrate certain types of metal sheeting from the agricultural buildings. Soon, human fighters were wrapping themselves in salvaged metal that made them invisible to alien technology. They moved through the colony like armored ghosts, striking where the aliens least expected. The Castillo family had lost their farm in the first bombardment. But Carlos wasn't finished fighting. His knowledge of the land became a weapon. He knew every stream, every hill, every patch of forest around the colony. When alien patrols ventured outside the settlement, they found themselves lost in terrain that looked simple, but hid deadly surprises. Carlos led them into swamps where their heavy armor became a liability. He guided them along paths that looked solid but were actually quicksand covered with vegetation. Alien soldiers began disappearing without a trace, swallowed by a world that seemed actively hostile to their presence. The Brooks family used their livestock knowledge in unexpected ways. Tom Brooks understood animal behavior, and he realized that the local wildlife was afraid of the aliens. By watching where the purple rabbit creatures wouldn't go, human scouts could identify alien positions hours before any direct contact. Nancy. Brooks used her library skills to organize intelligence reports. She created maps showing alien patrol patterns, weapon placements, and supply routes. Her careful documentation helped human fighters avoid patrols and find weak spots in alien defenses. The war became personal for both sides. Pete Johnson's burns from the first attack had healed, but they left scars that reminded him every day of what the aliens had taken from him. His greenhouse, his prized tomatoes, his peaceful life, all destroyed in moments by creatures who saw humans as nothing more than obstacles. But the aliens were suffering too. They had expected a quick conquest followed by easy occupation. Instead, they were dying slowly in a hostile environment against an enemy that refused to fight fairly. Their casualties mounted day by day, and they had nothing to show for it except control of empty buildings. The turning point came when Maria Santos led a raid on an alien communication post. Her team consisted of 5 farmers and a retired school teacher. None of them had military training, but they knew the value of timing and patience. They watched the post for 3 days, learning the guards' routine. The attack lasted less than 5 minutes. The humans struck at shift change when the aliens were distracted. They used silenced weapons and moved with practiced coordination. By the time the alarm sounded, the communication post was destroyed and the raiders had vanished back into the tunnel system. But Maria's team did more than destroy alien equipment. They captured data storage devices and brought them back to Lisa Park. The information they contained was beyond human ability to decode, but Lisa learned something important from studying the alien technology. Their communications are more complex than ours, she explained to the emergency council. But they follow patterns. I think I can predict when they're going to make major moves. This intelligence advantage became crucial as the war dragged on. Human fighters could be in position to ambush alien forces before those forces even knew where they were going. The aliens found themselves walking into traps that seemed impossible to predict. Commander HFY requested reinforcements from the Zephyrian Empire. His reports described human resistance as unlike anything his people had encountered. The humans didn't just fight for territory or resources. They fought for something his species couldn't understand: the right to exist free from outside control. The request for reinforcements was approved, but it would take weeks for additional forces to arrive. In the meantime, Commander HFY had to hold what ground he had already taken with troops that were increasingly demoralized and afraid. The humans, meanwhile, were learning that they were capable of things they had never imagined. Peaceful. Farmers had become efficient killers. Quiet teachers had become master tacticians. The colony that had been built for growing crops was now perfect for growing something else, a resistance that would not be broken. The breakthrough came on a cold morning 6 weeks after the invasion began. Nick Harper had been monitoring alien communications when he noticed something different. The signal patterns were changing. Instead of short, tactical messages, the aliens were sending long transmissions toward deep space. "They're talking to someone far away," Nick told Lisa Park. "Really far away. These signals are going outside the solar system." Lisa studied the data for 3 days before she understood what they were seeing. The aliens weren't just occupying New Haven. They were reporting back to a larger force, and based on the signal strength and duration, that larger force was enormous. "We need to capture one of their communication arrays," she told Governor Morrison. "If we can decode even part of their transmissions, we might learn what's really happening." The mission fell to Nick Harper and a team of volunteers. Among them was Ben Clark, the college student who had come home for Harvest Festival and never left. Ben had studied engineering, and his understanding of technology made him valuable for this kind of operation. The target was an alien communication station built on the ruins of the old water treatment plant. It was heavily guarded, but the humans had learned to use the aliens' own tactics against them. They would create diversions at multiple locations, drawing guards away from their primary target. Maria Santos led one diversion team in an attack on Alien Supply Depot. The Castillo family created another distraction by setting fire to alien fuel storage tanks on the far side of the colony. While alien forces rushed to respond to these apparent emergencies, Nick's team slipped into the communication station. The equipment was like nothing from human technology. Crystalline structures pulsed with energy that seemed to flow like liquid light. Ben studied the alien devices while Nick worked to patch into their data streams. They had maybe 10 minutes before the diversions ended and the guards returned. "Got it," Nick whispered into his radio. "We're copying their transmission logs. Another 2 minutes and we'll have everything." But the aliens were smarter than the humans realized. The attacks on their supply depots were too coordinated to be random. Commander Vexhai had begun to suspect that human intelligence was better than it appeared. He had set traps of his own. The communication station was one of those traps. Hidden sensors detected the human intrusion within seconds. Instead of sounding alarms, the aliens quietly surrounded the building. They wanted to capture human fighters, alive for interrogation. The battle was brief but vicious. Nick's team fought their way out of the building using weapons and tactics perfected over weeks of guerrilla warfare. But the cost was terrible. Half the team died in the escape, including 2 members of the Brooks family who had volunteered despite having no military experience. Ben Clark made it back to the tunnels, but he was badly wounded. Dr. Amy Chen worked for hours to save his life while Lisa Park studied the data they had captured. What she found changed everything. The alien transmissions were partially readable, enough for Lisa to understand the scope of what they were facing. New Haven wasn't the aliens' primary target. It was just a test, a small experiment to see how humans would react to invasion. "There's a much larger force coming," Lisa told the emergency council. "Hundreds of ships, maybe thousands. They're heading for Earth right now." The room fell silent. Everyone understood what this meant. Earth had billions of people, but they had no idea what was coming. The aliens had used New Haven to study human behavior and tactics. Now they would use that knowledge to conquer humanity's home world. Governor Morrison felt the weight of impossible choices. New Haven was dying slowly. Their population had dropped from 50,000 to fewer than 3,000. They couldn't hold out much longer against the aliens already here. But Earth needed to know what was coming. "We have to warn them," Jake said. "Even if it costs us everything." The plan was desperate even by the standards of what had become a desperate war. The humans had observed alien scout ships coming and going from the main fleet. These smaller, Vessels were lightly defended but capable of faster-than-light travel. If they could capture one, they might be able to reach Earth before the invasion fleet arrived. Roy Phillips studied the alien ship designs from surveillance footage. His mechanical knowledge, combined with Ben's engineering background and Kate Rodriguez's technical skills, gave them hope that they could figure out how to operate captured alien technology. It's like trying to fly a machine built by people who think completely differently than we do, Kate explained. But machines are machines. They follow rules of physics we understand. The target was a small alien courier ship that made regular trips between the surface and the main fleet. It landed at a heavily fortified site near what used to be the colony's main landing pad. Getting to it would require going through the heart of alien-controlled territory. Danny Walsh planned the assault like a military operation because that's what it had become. Every remaining fighter in the colony would participate. Some would attack alien strongholds to draw defenders away from the landing site. Others would create corridors of escape for the ship capture team. The attack began at dawn. Explosions rocked alien positions across the colony as human fighters struck with everything they had left. Roy Phillips had turned the last of the agricultural equipment into weapons. Mining charges brought down buildings on alien positions. Crop dusters became bombing platforms that struck from unexpected angles. Pete Johnson died in the assault on the alien command post. He was 63 years old and had never fired a weapon in anger before the invasion. But he charged an alien machine gun position with nothing but determination and a bag of homemade grenades. His sacrifice allowed other fighters to reach their objectives. Helen Johnson took her husband's place in the assault team without hesitation. She had learned to fight during the weeks of resistance, and her quiet fury was more dangerous than any military training. The aliens had taken everything from her: her home, her peaceful life, her husband. She intended to make them pay. The ship captured team reached their target as planned, but they found the alien vessel guarded by soldiers in powered armor. The fighting was close and brutal. Carlos Castillo fell with an alien energy weapon blast through his chest. His son held his father as he died, then picked up the old man's rifle and continued the attack. Ben Clark, still weak from his wounds, managed to breach the ship's entry systems. His engineering knowledge let him understand the basic controls, even though the alien technology was far beyond human science. As the ship's engines began to warm up, he called for the evacuation team. But there wasn't time for everyone to escape. The aliens were counterattacking in force, and the human fighters were running out of ammunition. Someone had to stay behind to hold the landing site long enough for the ship to launch. Governor Morrison made the choice that leadership sometimes requires. He would stay with the fighters who couldn't escape. They would hold the aliens back for as long as possible. The ship would carry a small crew to Earth with intelligence about the coming invasion. Nick Harper piloted the captured alien vessel with Lisa Park as his communications officer. Ben Clark worked frantically to understand the ship's navigation systems. Behind them, New Haven burned as the remaining human fighters made their last stand. The launch was rough. Human hands weren't designed for alien controls, and the ship nearly crashed twice before they cleared the atmosphere. But they made it to space and activated what they hoped was the faster-than-light drive. On the surface, the final battle for New Haven was ending. Danny Walsh died defending the elementary school where Linda Carter had taught so many children. Kate Rodriguez was killed while trying to destroy the alien ship that had carried their invasion force. Governor Morrison gathered the survivors in the ruins of the town square where they had celebrated Harvest Festival so many weeks ago. Fewer than 200 people remained from a colony of 50,000. They were tired, hungry, and surrounded by overwhelming enemy forces. Commander Vexhai approached under a flag of truce. He was battered and exhausted. His species had conquered 17 worlds, but none had cost him so much. Nearly half his invasion force was dead or wounded. His equipment was depleted, and his soldiers were afraid. "Surrender now," he offered. "Your resistance has been noted. You will be treated as prisoners of war, not slaves." Jake Morrison looked around at his people. They were farmers and teachers and mechanics who had learned to fight because they had no choice. They had lost everything except their determination to remain free. "We'll give you our answer," Jake said. "But first, you should know something. We sent word to Earth about your invasion fleet. They know you're coming, and they know how you fight. You taught us that when you chose to make war on farmers." Commander HFY's scaled face showed something that might have been surprise. His intelligence reports had said humans were weak and disorganized. They weren't supposed to be capable of this kind of strategic thinking. "It doesn't matter," the alien commander said. "Earth is unprepared for war. Your home world will fall, as easily as this colony should have." Governor Morrison smiled, and there was no warmth in the expression. "You spent 6 weeks learning how farmers fight. Earth has real soldiers. Professional warriors who have studied war their entire lives. I almost feel sorry for you." The decision came to Jake Morrison with the clarity that only arrives in moments when everything is lost. Around him, the last survivors of New Haven stood in the ruins of their home. Children who should have been playing in safe streets, farmers who should have been worried about weather and crop prices, teachers and mechanics and shopkeepers who had learned to kill because the alternative was slavery. Commander HFY waited for their surrender with the patience of a predator who knows the prey has nowhere left to run. His remaining forces surrounded the human survivors. Overhead, the massive alien ship still blocked out the sun like mechanical storm clouds. "Your choice is simple," the alien commander said through his translator device. "Surrender and live, as prisoners, or die uselessly for nothing." But Jake Morrison understood something the alien didn't. Sometimes dying for nothing was better than living for something you couldn't accept. He had spent weeks watching his people discover what they were truly capable of when pushed beyond all limits. Now, he would find out what they were willing to sacrifice for their principles. "Kate," he called to Rodriguez, though she was 3 days dead. Then he remembered and turned to Roy Phillips, who had taken over her technical duties. "Roy, are the charges ready?" Roy nodded grimly. During the weeks of fighting, they had prepared for this moment. The nuclear devices from their terraforming equipment had been repositioned throughout the colony's underground systems. Not as weapons of war, but as a final statement about human freedom. "Every major tunnel junction is rigged," Roy said. "The blast will take out everything for 20 miles in every direction." Commander HFY's translator struggled with human words it hadn't heard before. Nuclear, charges, blast. When the meaning became clear, the alien commander took a step backward. His species understood warfare, but they had never encountered an enemy willing to destroy their own world rather than submit. "You're bluffing," HFY said. "No intelligent species would choose mutual destruction over survival." Linda Carter laughed, and the sound was sharp with exhaustion and grief. She had taught human history for 30 years before coming to New Haven. "You clearly haven't studied our species very carefully. We've been choosing death over slavery for thousands of years." The alien commander activated his communication device and spoke rapidly in his own language. Jake could guess what he was saying, requesting instructions, trying to understand whether humans were insane or if this was some kind of elaborate psychological warfare. While they waited, Dr. Amy Chen moved among the survivors, treating wounds and offering what comfort she could. Her medical supplies were nearly exhausted, but her determination remained strong. She paused beside Ben Clark, who had returned from his mission to Earth with news. "The ship made it through," Ben whispered to Jake. "Nick and Lisa got the intelligence. To Earth Command. The defense fleets are mobilizing." Jake nodded. That was something, at least. Earth would have warning about the invasion fleet, but it might not be enough. The aliens had spent weeks studying human tactics and technology. They would adapt their strategy based on what they had learned at New Haven. Commander HFY received his instructions and approached the human survivors again. His posture was different now, more formal, more respectful. He had finally begun to understand what kind of enemy he was facing. "My superiors offer new terms," he said. "Complete surrender in exchange for preservation of your lives and eventual resettlement on a world of your choosing. Under alien rule," Danny Walsh said. He was wounded but still standing, still carrying the rifle that had become an extension of his hands during weeks of fighting. "Under the protection of the Zephyrian Empire," HFY corrected. "Your species would be classified as a protected client state." Jake Morrison looked around at his people one final time. They were dirty and exhausted and surrounded by the ashes of everything they had built, but their eyes were clear. They knew what this choice really meant. Accept protection that was just another word for slavery, or make a statement that would echo across the galaxy. "Here's our answer," Jake said, and his voice carried clearly across the ruined town square. "We came to this world to build something new, something free. We'd rather see it burn than watch it become a cage." He pulled out the detonation device that Kate Rodriguez had built before she died. It was simple technology, just a radio transmitter, connected to receivers throughout the underground tunnel system. One signal would trigger every charge simultaneously. "Wait," Commander HFY said, and for the first time his voice carried something that might have been desperation. "Your resistance here has been noted. Your courage has been acknowledged. The Empire can offer your species a place of honor among our client races." "We don't want honor," said Maria Santos. "We want freedom." "Freedom to do what?" HFY demanded. "Freedom to grow crops? To raise children? To build towns? The Empire offers all of these things under our protection." "Freedom to choose," Jake said simply. "Freedom to succeed or fail on our own terms. Freedom to be human without asking permission from anyone." The alien commander's scales shifted color in what might have been frustration or confusion. His species had conquered 17 worlds, and every other intelligent race had eventually accepted the logic of submission. Superior force meant inevitable victory. Resistance only increased the cost in lives. But humans seemed to operate by different mathematics. They calculated victory and defeat using factors that made no sense to alien logic. They would choose certain death over uncertain freedom. They would destroy paradise rather than live in a beautiful prison. "Your nuclear devices will kill everyone," HFY pointed out. "Human and Zephyrian alike. What do you accomplish except pointless destruction?" Jake Morrison smiled, and the expression was terrible to see. "We accomplish the most important thing of all. We choose our own ending." He looked up at the alien ships that filled the sky. Thousands of enemy soldiers and advanced technology that humans couldn't match. But none of it mattered anymore. The outcome of this war wouldn't be decided by superior weapons or tactical advantage. It would be decided by will. "This message is for your superiors," Jake said, speaking directly to the alien commander's recording devices. "You wanted to see what humans do when cornered. You wanted to test our resolve. You wanted to know if we would fight or submit when faced with overwhelming force." He held up the detonation device where the alien cameras could see it clearly. "This is your answer. Remember it when you reach Earth. Remember it when you try to conquer other human colonies. Remember it when you wonder whether our species is worth the trouble of ruling." The explosion that consumed New Haven could be seen from space. Nuclear fire rose like a new sun from the surface of the planet, consuming alien and human alike in democratic destruction. The blast wave flattened everything for 20 miles in every direction and sent a pulse of electromagnetic energy racing outward at light speed. Commander HFY died in the first microsecond, along with his entire ground force and most of his orbital fleet. The few alien ships that survived the blast limped away from the radioactive wasteland that had once been humanity's first agricultural colony. The message traveled faster than the survivors. Within hours, every intelligence service, In the galaxy was analyzing the data from New Haven. A primitive species had chosen collective suicide rather than accept subjugation. They had turned their own world into a weapon and used it to destroy a superior enemy force. Nick Harper and Lisa Park reached Earth 2 days ahead of the Zephyrian invasion fleet. Their stolen alien ship carried complete intelligence about enemy, capabilities, tactics, and most importantly, psychology. Earth's defense forces had time to prepare a welcome that would make New Haven's resistance look like a training exercise. The Zephyrian invasion of Earth lasted exactly 18 hours. Humanity's home system had been turned into a fortress over the previous months, with automated weapons platforms, gravity mines, and defensive fleets positioned at every approach route. But the real surprise was the human crews manning those defenses. They fought like the colonists of New Haven had fought, with determination, creativity, and absolute refusal to accept defeat. They turned asteroids into guided missiles, space stations into bombs, and their own ships into weapons of last resort. When the alien invasion fleet retreated, it carried fewer than half the soldiers it had brought. The war ended officially 6 months later when the Zephyrian Empire sued for peace. Unofficially, it ended the moment Jake Morrison triggered the charges under New Haven. No species that would destroy its own worlds rather than submit could ever be truly conquered. The memorial on Earth was simple, a black wall with 50,000 names carved in stone. At the top, larger than the rest, were the words Jake Morrison had spoken in his final transmission. Remember that humans choose their own fate, even if that fate is fire. Below the memorial, Earth's children learned the story of New Haven. How farmers became warriors, how a peaceful colony became a weapon, how 50,000 people chose death over slavery and saved billions of others by that choice. In the years that followed, human colonies spread across the galaxy under a simple rule: never again would humanity build a world without. The morning sun rose over New Haven like it had for the past 15 years. Jake Morrison stood on his porch and watched the golden light spread across the fields. He was the governor of this place, but he liked to think of himself as just another farmer. The coffee in his cup was still warm, and the air smelled like fresh bread from the bakery down the street. 50,000 people called New Haven home. They had built something good here on this alien world. The planet had 2 moons and purple grass, but it felt more like home than Earth ever did. The soil was rich, and the crops grew better than anyone had hoped. Corn, wheat, and soybeans filled the fields as far as the eye could see. Pete Johnson was already working in his field when Jake walked by. Pete had been one of the first farmers to figure out how to make Earth crops grow in alien dirt. His wife Helen waved from their front door. She was getting ready to take their kids to school. "Morning, Governor," Pete called out. "Harvest Festival tonight. You coming?" Jake nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. Linda's got the kids putting on some kind of play." Linda Carter ran the school. She used to teach at a university on Earth before she came out here. She said teaching farm kids was harder than teaching college students, but Jake knew she loved it. Her classroom was always full of laughter. The main street of New Haven looked like something from old Earth movies. White houses with front porches lined both sides. The general store, the diner, and the medical clinic all faced each other around a small park. Dr. Amy Chen had her office there. She took care of everyone from broken bones to new babies. Danny Walsh walked past the park. He was the security chief, though most days his biggest worry was keeping the local wildlife out of the gardens. The planet had these things that looked like purple rabbits but ate everything green. Danny carried a stunner, not a real weapon. There had never been any need for real weapons. Maria Santos was loading her truck with vegetables for the market. She grew the best tomatoes on the planet. Her greenhouse was a wonder of engineering built by Kate Rodriguez. Kate could fix anything and build anything. She had turned old Earth machines into tools that worked perfectly in this alien world. The Harvest Festival happened every year when the main crops came in. Families would gather in the town square. There would be music and dancing and more food than anyone could eat. The kids would play games while the adults talked about the weather and the crops and whose daughter was dating whose son. Roy Phillips was setting up the stage for tonight's festival. He was a mechanic who kept all the farm equipment running. His hands were always dirty with grease, but he could make any machine purr like a cat. Roy's daughter was going to sing tonight. She had a voice like an angel. The communications center sat on a small hill overlooking the town. Nick Harper worked there, keeping New Haven connected to the other human colonies. He used to be a smuggler before he settled down. Sometimes he told stories about the old days that made the kids' eyes go wide. Lisa Park worked with Nick. She understood computers and radios better than anyone. She could fix a broken transmitter with spare parts and wire. Lisa was quiet, but when she spoke, people listened. New Haven had been lucky. No wars, no disasters, no alien contact. The surveys had shown this sector of space was empty. No intelligent life for 100 light years in any direction. The colonists could build their new world in peace. The older folks remembered the early days. The first winter had been hard, the prefab shelters were cold, and the food supplies ran low. But they had made it through. Year by year, they had built something beautiful. Children ran through the streets without fear. Ben Clark was home from college for the festival. He studied engineering at the Colonial University 2 systems away. His parents were proud of their boy. He would probably leave New Haven someday, but he would always remember growing up here. The Brooks family lived on the edge of town. Tom Brooks raised cattle that grazed in fields of purple grass. His wife Nancy ran the town's small library. Their 3 kids helped with the animals after school. The Castillo family had the biggest farm in the colony. Carlos Castillo grew grain that fed half the colony. His son worked the fields while his daughter studied to be a doctor like Amy Chen. They had come from Earth with nothing and built an empire of dirt and sweat. Evening came quickly. The town square filled with people carrying covered dishes and folding chairs. String lights hung between the trees. The smell of barbecue and fresh pie filled the air. Children ran between the adults, their laughter mixing with the sound of fiddle music. Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the crowd and smiled. This was what they had come so far to build, not just farms and houses, but a community, a place where people knew their neighbors and helped each other, a place where children could grow up safe and happy. Governor Morrison had secrets, though. Buried under New Haven were things the colonists didn't know about, tunnels and bunkers left over from the early days when Earth's government was afraid of everything, emergency supplies and hidden rooms that could keep the whole colony alive for months if needed. The military had insisted on the bunkers before the first colonists left Earth. Jake had thought it was crazy then. Who would attack a farming colony in the middle of nowhere? The construction crews had built them anyway, then covered them up and planted grass on top. Most people had forgotten they even existed. Danny Walsh knew about the bunkers, so did Kate Rodriguez and a few others. They were the emergency council chosen to make hard decisions if something terrible ever happened. They met once a year to check the emergency supplies and update the evacuation plans. It felt like a game. What were the chances they would ever need any of it? The festival went late into the night. Families danced under the stars. Old men told stories while children listened with wide eyes. Young couples walked hand in hand through the moonlight. It was perfect. It was everything they had dreamed of when they left Earth behind. As the last families headed home, Jake Morrison walked through the empty square. Paper cups and napkins blew in the gentle wind. Tomorrow there would be cleanup, but tonight there was just peace. He looked up at the alien stars and felt grateful for this quiet life. In the distance, space was dark and silent. No ships moved between the stars. No alien eyes watched the little human colony. New Haven slept in perfect safety, surrounded by empty space and gentle dreams. But space was bigger than humans knew, and not as empty as they hoped. Far away, other eyes were beginning to turn toward the small world where humans grew their crops and raised their children. Soon, very soon, New Haven's peaceful days would end.